Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Putra Pangestu. I am a student of Ajhi Maritime University, study program of the Faculty of Teacher Education, English Education. This video is for a presentation on cross-cultural understanding, male and female relationships. The first one is a stereotype about American men and women. According to social role theory, gender stereotypes derive from the discrepant distribution of men and women into social roles both in the home and at work. This contrasting distribution of men and women into social roles and the interference it prompts about what women and men are like. Given rise to gender stereotypical conceptions, accordingly, men are characterized as more agentic than women, taking charge and being in control, and women are characterized as more communal than men, being attuned to others and building relationships. During the last decades, agency and communality have consistently been the focus of research. This socialization experience no doubt continued to exert influence later in life, and indeed, research has shown that men's and women's self-characterization differ in ways that are stereotype consistent. Researchers have investigated people's stereotypical assumptions about how men and women differ in terms of, for example, ascribed traits, role behaviors, occupations, or emotions. Explicit measures of stereotyping into response to questionnaires asking for description of men or women using Likert or bipolar adjective scales, or asking for beliefs about the percentage of men and women possessing certain traits and attributes. Contemporary gender stereotypes. Researchers often argue that stereotypes are tenacious. They learn to have a self-perpetuating quality that is sustained by cognitive distortion. However, stereotype maintenance is not only a product of the inflexibility of people's beliefs but also a consequence of the societal roles women and men enact. Koenig and Egley, for example, the three most common occupations for women in the US involve care for others, while men more than women tend to work in occupations requiring agentic attributes. Sociological research shows that women are underrepresented in occupations that are highly competitive, inflexible, and require high levels of physical skill, while they are overrepresented in occupations that place emphasis on social contributions and require interpersonal skills. Moreover, though men's home and family responsibilities have increased, women continue to perform a disproportionate disproportion- disproportionate amount of domestic work, have greater childcare responsibilities, and continue to be expected to do so. However, a recent meta-analysis has found that various women's self-perceptions of communality have decreased over time. Their self-perceptions of the agency have remained stable since the 1990s. Women and gender discrimination. Girls and women suffer most of the negative impact of rigid gender norms and roles. They are more likely to experience restrictions of their freedom and mobility. They experience epidemic levels of violence and harassment across the globe and have fewer opportunities to choose how to live their lives. Sexual harassment, catcalling. Harassment and catcalling on the street are prime examples of how women's right to walk freely around their environment is restricted. These stereotypes can often bleed out into school and work, where girls are less likely to be encouraged into science and technology subjects or leadership roles. Due to perceived male nature of these pursuits, likewise, positive stereotypes and gender roles such as men being the provider or protector of the family put an unnecessary burden on men and boys that could more positively be shared in an equal partnership. It commonly happens in the media where women are photoshopped and airbrushed, leading to much more emphasis and value being put on their external appearance above other capacities. However, girls are also often represented poorly in entertainment and the media in ways that reinforce damaging gender stereotypes and traditional roles. Objectification must be called out and girls must be encouraged to tell their own stories, ones that reflect their power, potential, and diversity. Speak out about your own experience. It's important if you feel comfortable to call out your own experience of discrimination. It's important to note that there are dangers associated with calling others out on their behavior. People may not like to have their viewpoints challenged. They may react negatively or aggressively. So if your instincts tell you that a situation is so risky, your safety is the priority. Often the best course of action when discrimination is experienced is to alert an authority figure, a member of staff on public transport, or where relevant, your teacher or your boss. The more they are made aware these issues are happening, the more they'll be encouraged to step in and be part of the solution. Call out discrimination in the media and advertising. Write to advertisers, marketers, and media outlets if you come across stories that portray women and girls in a reductive of unfair way. Find out who is responsible and write to them to let them know you talk. Don't support entertainment that is disrespectful to girls and women and doesn't represent their true power, potential, talent, and diversity. A great way to make a big effect in pursuit of gender equality is to join with others. There is strength in numbers. More voices tackling a particular issue means they are more likely to be heard. Helping to be raise the profile of campaigns by other marginalized groups is a vital part of ending discrimination. For example, groups from a minority or indigenous community may experience racism as well as sexism, and members of the LGBTIQ+ community may also be experiencing homophobia. It's okay to not tolerate discrimination every time you see it. As mentioned above, sometimes calling out discrimination can carry risk. Just changing how we relate with others and demanding that others do the same will not end gender inequality. Don't feel defeated by this big obstacle. A small achievement is an extra step towards our shared goal. Caring for ourselves means we can continue to advocate for gender equality, so always make sure you are maintaining your well-being. Women liberation. 50 years ago, the women's strike for equality brought tens of thousands of women out onto the street in more than 90 cities. One of his keys in psych war was articulated in the catchphrase, "The personal is political." Many women of all races threw themselves into work of understanding and transforming basic facts about their own lives, as well as legal and institutional frameworks. While the August 1970 March on Washington was called by the National Organization for Women, a liberal feminist group, many of its participants were energized through participation in local women's liberation groups. Looking back on that era, many people today see a movement made up of white, middle-class women fixated on their problems. In the 1960s, radical women to all races were reacting against the sexism of male leadership in leftist groups like the Black Panthers and Students for a Democratic Society. There is no doubt that white women too often universalize their own experience by presuming to speak to and for all women civil rights. But later generations failed to notice that women of color from the beginning raised the problem of their double jeopardy, pointing out the sharp difference in experience when gender interacts with race and class. The energy of women's liberation activists produced huge results in the early 1970s, but the intensity of women's liberation declined under the wake of infighting, burnout, and a general cultural retreat from utopian thinking. It was these academic-based theorists who fixed the perception of 1970s second wave feminists as white, middle-class, self-interest, and anti-sex. Events rise into this era of multiracial street protests of led by black women and other women of color. It's worth revisiting the multiracial activism that was women's liberations. And finally is the sexual revolution. At the core of the sexual revolution was the concept political at the time that women, just like men, enjoy sex and have sexual needs. For social conservatives, the sexual revolution was an invitation for promiscuity and an attack on the very foundation of American society, the family. Feminists and social conservatives quickly clashed over the morality of the sexual revolution, and the field was run into the debate to fill a scapegoat. As female sexuality and premarital sex moved out of the shadows, the pill became a convenient scapegoat for the sexual revolution among social conservatives. The theory was that the risk of pregnancy and the stigma that went along with it prevented a single woman from having sex and married women from having affairs. Since women on the pill could control their fertility, single and married women could have sex anytime, any place, and with anyone without the risk of pregnancy. The double standard. Although it was acceptable for single men to have sex, the idea of young women behaving in the same way disturbed many in America. Technology and behavior. In response to conservative attacks on the pill, the developers of the pill, John Rock and Gregory Pincus, argued that technology does not determine behavior. Despite the veneer of a chaste society and socially conservative morality, there was clinical research to back up their views. The rise of a single culture. Despite of the social conservative agenda, as the decade progressed, societal emphasis on virginity and marriage were slowly replaced by a celebration of single life and sexual exploration. Helen Gurley Brown's book Sex and the Single Girl championed a woman and open sexuality, effectively destroying the notion of the old maid. For many who came of age in this era, the traditional notion that a woman would be able to find a husband if she were a virgin was absurd. Though social conservatives blame these sweeping changes in America, values on the oral conservative most historians now believe that in reality the pill did not cause the sexual revolution in America. Alright, that is all for my video today. Thank you for watching. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.